really wanna know, then come on, let's go. Take a stroll down those...
What's going on, Mountaineer Nation? Welcome into another edition of the Country Roads Webcast, brought to you by Trio 4 Productions, the official podcast of Almost Heaven Athletics and AlmostHeavenAthletics.com. We're coming to you a little bit later in the week than what we usually do, but we're going to make that up to you by giving you a special 2-for-1 episode here on this edition, as we're going to recap the Baylor game, as well as get into previewing the upcoming West Virginia Mountaineers versus Texas Longhorns game, which will be the 8th game of the 2018 WVU football season. I'm getting ready to be joined by my sometimes co-host here on the Country Roads Webcast and content contributor and writer for AlmostHeavenAthletics.com, where he covers Mountaineer football and basketball, in Steven Vestal. And we're going to recap this West Virginia versus Baylor game from about a week ago now. And also we're going to unveil a new segment for you guys and then get deep into our preview of the upcoming game against the Texas Longhorns. So really great show coming up for you here on the Country Roads Webcast. Stay tuned. All right, we are now joined on the Country Roads Webcast by Steven Vestal of AlmostHeavenAthletics.com. He writes for them and helps cover Mountaineer football and basketball, and my sometimes co-host here on the Country Roads Webcast. How you doing, Steven? Good to have you back on, man.
Doing pretty good. Thanks for having me, man.
No doubt. Always a pleasure. Let's talk about this West Virginia game versus Baylor, this big bounce-back game. So West Virginia, you know, they had the big loss, had the bye week following that. Everybody wanted them to bounce back, and they did so in a big way, man. You know, I think even bigger than a lot of us even expected. They won that one 58-14 to move to 6-1 overall and 4-1 in Big 12 play. 41 points in the first half. School record for total yardage in the first half. Do you like what you seen out there from the Mountaineers against Baylor?
Oh yeah, I loved what I seen out there. I think the thing that I love the most about what I've seen out there is, you know, we speak a lot about our offense, you know, how they scored 41 points in the first half and, you know, hung 58 on them. But I think our defense really set a statement for what they want their identity to be this season and, you know, what they want to be recognized as, because I don't think that they felt like they were getting enough credit even after the Iowa State loss, because, you know, I've been saying it for weeks now. If the offense would have, you know, played the way they were capable of, they would have beaten that Iowa State team.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. Big thing about it is that you could really, surprisingly, you could say that the defense has actually kind of carried this team a little bit this year and been the strongest point, even, you know, which is surprising with the offense West Virginia had. But especially in that game, you know, Baylor didn't even cross midfield in the first half, I don't believe, and you know, they forced a lot of turnovers. And that first quarter, kind of West Virginia was slow getting going. Only scored 10 points in that first quarter, but the West Virginia defense was just like, all right, we're going to hold Baylor still till you guys get rolling, and, you know, force 3 and out after then turnover after turnover, 3 and out after 3 and out throughout that whole first quarter till that offense got rolling and put up 31 points in that second quarter for West Virginia.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It was definitely, you know, just I've got your back until you've got going kind of mentality for the defense on Thursday. Absolutely.
I think they're playing with a lot of confidence right now. That's evidenced by some of the stats. Let's run down through some of the team statistics in this game. Baylor 287 yards versus 568 for West Virginia, and could have been a lot more for West Virginia if they wanted to really keep the foot on the gas in that fourth quarter. They kind of just played run out the clock a little bit with the game well in hand. You know, I think this was a game that was kind of over early. Pass yards, Baylor 205, West Virginia 396. Rush yards, West Virginia held them under 100. Rush yards 82. West Virginia had 172. Penalties 8 for Baylor, 6 for West Virginia. Third downs, Baylor was 5 of 14. West Virginia was 1 of 10. Plays 65 for Baylor, 64 for West Virginia. Baylor was 2 of 3 in the red zone. West Virginia was 4 of 4. 4 turnovers for Baylor versus 0 for West Virginia. And the Mountaineers had 5 sacks and 12 tackles for loss. Any of those numbers there stand out at you, Steven?
The 12 tackles for loss, going back to the defense again, I think that really jumps out to me. It was really fun to watch. I'll say that. just watching the defense, how they played last year, it seemed like we couldn't get anything going. And this year, it's just been like a game by game, getting better every single week, kind of learning as they go kind of thing this year. And I really think that there's nowhere to go but up for this defense. And especially, for this offense too, because they've just been feeding off of the defense as they've been playing well. And I think that that's really gotten them back on track too, because I think that the offense kind of lost themselves somewhere, and I don't know if it was in the second half of the Texas Tech game or in the first half of the Kansas game, but it just seemed like they could not get their wheels going, and they finally did get it going back again in Baylor game.
Yeah, absolutely. It was good to see the team play together again and play pretty much a full 4 quarters for maybe the first time all season. And I want to say one of the numbers that stuck out to me was the continuing with the theme of talking about the West Virginia defense, is that the 287 yards they held Baylor to. That's only the third time in the last 8 years that Baylor has been held under 300 total yards. So that's very impressive, and that's a positive thing that stuck out to me. And then one thing that kind of jumped out to me when I looked at these stats that I had to do a double take at the first time I seen them was that West Virginia was 1 for 10 on third downs in this game, because that's something you wouldn't expect to see in a game that you win 58-14. And it's kind of a little bit concerning to me just because the fact that was West Virginia's strength earlier in this year was they were very efficient on third downs. And now last game against Iowa State they were 1 for 10, and this game they were also 1 for 10. So 2 for 20 on third downs in the last 2 games. They're going to have to get that back on track into where it was earlier in the season, but can't complain too much when you win 58-14. But that number just kind of jumped off the page to me there.
Oh yeah, especially going into a game like we have this week.
Absolutely, gotta be fishing against Texas for sure, because they're gonna make you earn it. Continue to talk about stats from this Baylor game. Let's talk about some of the standout performances. Will Greer was back to his normal self after the one bad game, maybe 2 if you count the Kansas game, but especially the Iowa State game. In this game, he was back to his normal self, going 17 of 27, 353 yards, 3 passing touchdowns, and also added a rushing touchdown. Tevin Bush, 1 carry for 79 yards and 1 catch for 13 yards. David Seals, 5 catches, 139 yards, 2 touchdowns. Gary Jennings, 3 catches, 100 yards, 2 touchdowns. And Wesco had 3 catches for 52 yards, and Haskins had 3 catches for 21 yards. So 3 catches from each of the tight ends there. Going over those numbers from the offense, who would you say is your player of the game offensively in this Baylor game?
I'm going to have to go with Willie G. I think that he, after the Iowa State game, as bad as he looked in that game, and as bad as the criticism was from the fan base, I think that he really did a good job of bouncing back and looking confident back there for the Baylor game.
Absolutely. Before I give my player of the game on offense, I do want to talk about speaking of quarterbacks, I want to talk about Jack Allison coming in there, and he had that beautiful touchdown pass to Gary Jennings that they gave him that one series with the first teamers early on in the first quarter, and he really looked pretty good in this game. 4-4, 43 yards and a touchdown, and I think that if he continues to improve, the Mountaineer offense will be in good hands going forward for sure. And then, you also had other young guys making plays. Tevin Bush, I thought this was his best game as a Mountaineer. He looked really explosive. A lot of that coming after the injury to Marcus Sims and him having to be put into more playing time. Martell Pettaway had that 33-yard touchdown run, which was good to see. One of our break a long touchdown run. But my player of the game offensively, I'm going to have to go ahead and give it to tight end Trevon Wesco. He had probably his best game receiving with the 3 catches, 52 yards, but also what he brought in blocking in this game, I thought really did a lot for the Mountaineers as they threw in a lot more screen passes, and he did a great job blocking on those, as well as lead blocking and pulling and some run plays and stuff, and then got out there on a couple seam routes and made some plays there on offense coming out of the tight end spot there. So I had to go with Wesco on this one. Just a little bit of a pick out of left field, but I thought that he was real impressive and vital to the turnaround of this offense in that one.
Yeah, I really like that pick. I thought about picking him myself just because of the fact that I really like the fact that we're using the tight ends more this season and getting those more involved with the offense. And I think that both of those guys have done a really good job of stepping up. And Trevon Wesco being a hometown kid, you really like to see that.
Absolutely. Got to love the 304 boys for sure. And, it's something else for the defense to have to plan against too. So that's just an added dimension that helps you from a game planning aspect when people are trying to plan against you.
It doesn't help when you're that big either.
Exactly. He's a load to bring down for anybody.
Or it doesn't hurt of it, I guess.
Defensively, some standout performances. Kenny Robinson led the team in tackles, 8 tackles, half a tackle for a loss. David Long as usual, 7 tackles, 2 TFLs, and a sack. Dante Stills, the true freshman, 3 tackles, 1 tackle for a loss, 1 sack, 1 forced fumble. Ezekiel Rose, 3 tackles, 1 TFL, 1 sack. Shea Campbell had half a tackle for a loss and an interception. Exery Lowe came in late in the game, had 2 TFLs, a sack, and a forced fumble as well. Torius Avery had an interception, and Keith Washington had an interception. Going over those, who would you select as your player of game defensively coming out of this game?
I'm going to have to go with David Long. The kid just seems like he has a nose for the ball. Any play, any and every play that he plays, and it has just never seemed to fail. He's always been the same player, whether it's been on last year's defense or this year's defense. He's always went 150%. And I'm going to be sad to watch him leave Morgantown this year.
Absolutely. He's probably, arguably the best linebacker the West Virginia has ever had, arguably. There's some other guys you can name up there with him, but he's one of my favorites for sure, and he lives in other teams' backfields. You got to love what David Long brings to the table week in and week out. My player of the game defensively, I mentioned some of the younger guys on offense, so I decided to go with a younger guy on defense as well, and defensive end Dante Stills. He's a true freshman, but he's really performed well in the limited playing time he's had this season in a reserve role. But he stood out in that game as he got more playing time in that second half. He laid that really hard hit on the Baylor quarterback, Jalen McClendon. There was a highlight play in this one, and finished with the 3 tackles, 1 tackle for a loss, 1 sack, and a forced fumble. So that's a great stat line, especially not getting in on too many snaps, and I think he's going to be an impact player for West Virginia for years to come.
Absolutely. That was a great hit on that quarterback.
Absolutely. I watched that one a few times over after that game, for sure.
Oh, it was definitely a fun play to watch.
For sure. Speaking of fun plays to watch, segue us right into our next little thing here where we want to talk about our plays of the game. What play would you have as your play of the game from this Baylor game?
I'm going to go with, if I can, multiple plays, if that makes sense. I want to just give a shout out to the interceptions that the defense got early, because I think with the way that the defense was playing for Baylor, stopping our offense early on after the first score that we had, I don't think that if we would have gotten those interceptions, those turnovers like that, I don't think that we would have had the momentum that we did to keep the ball rolling as such. So I think those interceptions that we got really got the ball rolling for us.
The pass, deflected, intercepted. Picked up by Keith Washington. Brewer over the middle to Hurd. And that's intercepted. Torius Avery back the other way. Brewer, pump fake, now throws over the middle, and that is picked off. Shea Campbell with the interception.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point there, because West Virginia won this game 58-14, but due to those interceptions, they were deep in Baylor territory, and 1 field goal was missed, 1 field goal was blocked. So that's 6 more points you could have had, and maybe if you get 2 touchdowns out of that drive, West Virginia could have had 70 points in this game or more. But like we kind of said earlier, that defense with those interceptions, did their part until the offense got rolling. So those interceptions were definitely vital in this game. My play of the game, I mentioned it briefly earlier, but I'm going to have to give it to Tevin Bush on that 79-yard jet sweep handoff he had. He took that, came in motion, took that handoff, hit the sideline, and was up the sideline, and should have scored on that play. I'm sure he's caught a lot of flack in the film room from not getting in, but I personally credit it to his height, because he was about a yard, 6 inches from the goal line. If he's 2 inches taller, he's falling into the end zone. He's only about 5'5", 5'6", so if he's a little taller, he might have got in on that one, but it was still a hell of a play by Tevin Bush for sure.
On first down, the handoff is to Tevin Bush on the end around, and there goes Bush down the sideline.
Yeah, I was kind of making fun of him up there to the guys that we sit around with. kind of making fun of him to myself whenever he didn't score on that play.
Yeah, he definitely. I would have liked to see him get in, but heck of a play either way, and he had a good game. Speaking of good things, let's talk about the most encouraging thing that came out of this game for you moving forward. Then we'll go over to the other side of it and talk about the most concerning thing that you thought coming out of this game. But let's start off on the positive side. What is most encouraging to you that came out of this game?
The most encouraging thing is our offense still can find a way to score that many points. I thought that we were kind of trending downwards with these last couple of games, and I didn't know if we were going to be able to come out of that slump. But it was really nice to see them get over not only the scores that we've had in our down games. That's the most points we've scored all season. So it was really nice to see that.
Absolutely, I agree. That's kind of where I went with my most encouraging thing. Is to me the most encouraging thing was we needed the offense to bounce back, and I wanted to personally see some adjustments from the offense because I felt like that's what really killed him in the Iowa State game was not adjusting, and I was hoping that they kind of learned from that game and made some changes. And on the recap show from that Iowa State game here, I talked about us not going over the middle a lot in that game, not targeting the tight end, not running screens. And then in this game, you see them come out. They run some screen passes we haven't seen before. They target the tight ends up the seam. They really do some creative things with the offense involving motion in the run plays and motion on the screen plays. Even that first touchdown to Gary Jennings was him coming in motion, faking a jet sweep, and then going upside on a wheel route. So the most encouraging thing for me was the offense's adjustments and how they got creative in order to get the offense going again. And I think that's a good sign going forward for what Jake Spavital's done. I don't know if Dana Holgorsen maybe had a hand in that himself as well and came in there and helped made some adjustments and get more creative. But either way, it's very encouraging to see the offense do that going forward. All right, now let's flip over to the other side of the coin and let's talk about what concerns you have going forward coming out of this game. Something from this game that maybe is concerning to you about this West Virginia team going forward.
You kind of touched on it earlier. I think that the going 1 for 10 on the third downs is kind of a red flag for me. If we don't get that corrected, especially going into a game that we are heading into this weekend, and even games after that against like TCU and Oklahoma State, we're going to have a really difficult time beating teams like that if you play like that. Yeah,
absolutely. I agree. That's I mentioned it earlier, and I said the same thing. And I was going to go that way for my concern, but then something else that really concerned me even more than that is the run game. Really, in this game, West Virginia didn't have a bad performance yardage-wise. If you look at the team statistics, they had 172 yards rushing, but 120 some of those came on 2 plays with the 79-yard run from Tevin Bush and the 33-yard run from Martell Pettaway. If you take out those runs for West Virginia, it amounts to about 2.6 yards per carry on all their other runs, and that's not going to get it done. That's kind of been a concern all years. The run blocking hasn't really been there. West Virginia hasn't really got a push in the run game. They did some things in this game to kind of counteract that with throwing some swing passes, which is kind of like an extension of the toss sweep play or something, and then got creative with jet sweeps to Tevin Bush and things like that. So they're doing some things to kind of counteract that, but still it's kind of concerning because if you can't run the ball and you're one-dimensional, that's going to make it harder for yourself going forward, especially if teams can really key on your pass game and come in there and blitz you all day because they know you can't run the ball, or if they can just sit back in coverage and know you can't run the ball against a light box. So the run game is the thing that's still most concerning to me about this West Virginia team going forward, and I hope that they do something and show something in these next 4 games and make a little improvement in run blocking and in the run game in general, hopefully.
Yeah, like you say, it's not necessarily the running backs either. It's more so towards leaning towards that offensive line not being, as strong as they should be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, as far as the running game is concerned, I think West Virginia has 4 good running backs, but it doesn't matter who you got back there. You can say that they need to make a guy miss. Well, making a guy miss is one thing, but having 2 or 3 guys on you as soon as you get the handoff is a completely other thing that nobody can really make something happen with.
Right.
All right, so that kind of puts a bow on the Baylor game and the recap for us on that. We're going to get into a new segment we're wanting to debut for you guys where we reach out to the fan base and get some of their opinions and questions. coming in from them. So we'll jump into that segment right now. First question we got this week is on Twitter from the Highlight Spiel. Another good podcast produced by Trio 4 Productions. Check that out if you haven't already. They preview college football every week. Good podcast there. And the guys at the Highlight Spiel ask us, it's a two-part question here actually, so I'll give you the first part. They say, do you think West Virginia can win out and make it to the Big 12 championship? And if so, will that be what sends Will Grier to New York for the Heisman ceremony? Steven, I'll let you go first on this one. What's your opinion there?
I will say that I think that they can win out. Do I think they will win out? I'm not sure that they will. With the way that Kyler Murray in Oklahoma is playing right now, I would love to say that West Virginia has the same type of offense that can go with them, and but I just don't see us beating Oklahoma.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think
if we do, however, I will say that if we do win out and beat Oklahoma, that would, in my mind, send Will Grier to New York. But yes.
Yeah, I'm absolutely right there with you. I think that West Virginia can win out, but the Oklahoma game is the game that stands out to me. Going into the season, in our season prediction show, I had our losses to Texas and Oklahoma. I'm still kind of iffy on Texas. We'll talk more about that in the preview coming up here in a bit. But I'm with you. Until I see them beat Oklahoma, I'm always going to be skeptical about that. So I think they can win out, but I don't know if they will. But I do think they've got a great chance to make it to the Big 12 championship, and a real vital game in that is coming up this Saturday against Texas. And then if they were to win out, I do think that Will Grier would probably go to New York for the Heisman ceremony. I think that if West Virginia ends up going to the Big 12 championship game, he has a good chance of going there anyway, depending on how many finalists they go with this year for the Heisman, because we've seen in years past they have 3 finalists some years and 4 finalists some years. I think he has a really great chance if they have 4 finalists, and if he has 3 finalists, he's probably going to have to beat Kyler Murray to get in over him maybe, or maybe Haskins have to not win the Big Ten and he can get in over him. But I think he has a good chance, and if West Virginia wins out, then he would definitely get in there. Second part of that question from the Highlight Spiel there on Twitter says, would West Virginia winning out mean that they would also make it into the playoffs? I'll take this one first, and I think that winning out and then winning that Big 12 championship game, they would have a great shot to get in the playoffs, because that would mean they probably either beat Texas twice or beat Oklahoma twice. And if they win out all the Final 4 games of the season plus a Big 12 championship game with 1 loss, they should be right there on the edge of that top 4, if not in it. So I think they'd have a good chance with winning out, but that's going to be a tough task because you're going to have to beat either Texas twice or Oklahoma twice probably. So I'm not too sure what the percentages are in that, but if they were to win out, I think that there's a good chance they would still end up in the college football playoffs, yes. What about you, Steven?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think if they do win out, there's no way that, including a Big 12 championship, there's no way that you can keep them out of the playoff. And that's, if you look at how, the LSU and the Alabama game coming up this weekend, if Alabama somehow loses to LSU, which I don't think that they will, but if they do lose to LSU, that kind of leaves all those teams up in the top 4 because you're crazy to think if you think Alabama's going to move anywhere with a loss to a number 3 LSU team.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
but even with that, there's going to be some shakeups throughout the season that West Virginia's still going to have time to move up if they, like you say, if they do win out. But they control their own destiny at this point.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of those teams that are ahead of West Virginia have to play each other and still have tough matchups, and a lot of those teams are going to knock themselves down. So if West Virginia wins, they definitely got a chance to continue moving up. Got a couple more questions here coming in from the Facebook side of things. Evan Brooks asks, with Jack Allison having some eligibility left and seeing this team evolve into more of an air raid style offense again, do you see West Virginia being a force in the Big 12 for the next few years? What do you say, Steven?
I do. I think I like what I've seen out of Jack Allison. I don't think that anybody in the entire fan base can argue with that at this point from what they've seen. But so far, so good. I don't think we'll skip a beat next year, especially with Jack Allison being able to study under Will Grier this season. Yeah,
I think I'm going to have to agree with you. I think that West Virginia's got a chance to be a team that's competing for Big 12 titles for the next few years here in the conference and be, in that top 4 teams, if not higher, in the Big 12. I think Jack Allison has really good potential. I think that, he sat out last season, and this season he is, actually getting to practice with the team rather than being on scout team during the redshirt year, which may not sound like a big thing, but if you look at Will Greer sat out and then, was starter the next season. Jack Allison is getting that extra year of experience and practice time that Will Greer didn't have before he took over as starter. So Jack Allison's got a chance to be even more far along with this offense and stuff than Will Greer was. And Jack Allison, as we saw against Baylor, throws a really good ball. He's not as athletic as Will Greer, but I think he's a very good passer and he has really good size. And West Virginia's going to have some good weapons around him as well, both offensively and defensively still, as they've recruited well and still have some young talent on this offense. So I think West Virginia's got a great chance to remain a force in the Big 12 for the next few years. And then our final question this week also comes from Facebook. Bradley Brown asks, Kelly Bryant, do you want him or not? For those that don't know, Kelly Bryant is transferring from Clemson. He's named, I think, 5 or 6 schools that he wants to visit and possibly come to. West Virginia is on that list. So that being said, Kelly Bryant, Steven, do you want him or do you not want him?
I will say this. I will say the kid is talented. He's got all the talent in the world, but I honestly can say that we don't need him. I'll say that we don't need him at West Virginia because he's got 1 year of eligibility left. We have quarterbacks, depth that's reaches far more than that eligibility does. And I think that we have quarterbacks that are probably better in the long run, better to play in the Big 12 probably. In my opinion, no, I don't think that I would want Kelly Bryant at West Virginia.
I'm gonna have to agree with you, and it's not that not that I don't want him necessarily, but like you said, we don't really need him for the simple fact we have Allison, have Lowe. West Virginia can use some other quarterbacks for depth, but I think that they want to go the route of adding a recruit or maybe adding a transfer with more eligibility than just the 1 year that can provide depth for a couple years, because I think that you're pretty much looking at Jack Allison being your starter for 2 years, followed by Trey Lowe probably being your starter for 2 years after that. So a guy with 1 year of eligibility, it's probably not going to help you too much except depth-wise, and Kelly Bryant's a guy that's probably going to be looking to start right away, as well as the fact that Kelly Bryant doesn't exactly fit with the mold of this offense and more of a runner and things. We've seen West Virginia play with quarterbacks like that before, but they changed up the entire offense, and I think that they like what they've got going right now and like Jack Allison's passing ability, so I'm going to have to say no on Kelly Bryant as well. So that will pretty much wrap up our question segment from the fans. If you want to get involved, and you can send us your questions or your comments, anything at any time. A few ways you can do that. You can write to us on our Facebook, or actually on the Almost Heaven Athletics Facebook, rather. We are the official podcast of Almost Heaven Athletics, so you can reach out to us there on Facebook, right on their wall, your question or whatever. We'll answer it on the upcoming show following whenever you post that. You can also reach us on Twitter at WVU Country Roads. Tag us with your question, we'll feature it. And then you can also reach us through the Almost Heaven Athletics Twitter at AHAthleticsWV. And then, of course, you can always email them also to almostheavenathletics@gmail.com. So a few ways if you want to make your voice heard here on the show, get your question answered, get your comments in. You can now do that with this new segment we've now added. And appreciate everyone that chimed in this week and hope to hear more from the fans going forward. That being said, let's get into previewing the 8th game of the West Virginia football season as we jump into our next segment and preview the matchup against the Texas Longhorns. All right, so the West Virginia Mountaineers are getting set to take on the Texas Longhorns in Austin, Texas on Saturday at 3:30. That game will be televised on Fox. West Virginia will come into the game at 6-1 overall, 4-1 in the Big 12, ranked 13th in the newly released college football playoff rankings, while Texas will come in at 6-2 overall, also 4-1 in the Big 12 conference, and they are currently ranked 17th in those college football playoff rankings. They're coming off 38-35 loss to Oklahoma State in Stillwater, and that snapped what had been a 6-game winning streak for the Longhorns. So West Virginia leads the all-time series versus Texas 4-3, and this will be the 8th meeting. West Virginia has won 3 of the 4 games played at Texas, but Texas is undefeated at home this season. Still got Steven Vestal, sometimes co-host, and from the almostheavenathletics.com site where he contributes for them and covers Mountaineer football and basketball. Steven, what's your opening thoughts as we get set to look ahead to this game against the Texas Longhorns?
I'm really excited for this one. Excited / nervous, I guess I should say. I think that we have played down there really well since we joined the Big 12. But they've also, like you said, they played really well down there this year. But I think West Virginia, if they can keep the momentum that they have going from last week into this week, it should be a really good game, I should say. But if you don't think that Austin's going to be rocking this weekend, especially them trying to get revenge off of the loss last week, it's going to be a fun one to watch, I believe.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you. Agree 100%. Really excited about it, really anxious about it, too, like you said. And, like I mentioned, Texas is undefeated at home so far this season. But the bright side of that is the last time West Virginia went down there into Austin in that 100,000-seat stadium in 2016, Texas was undefeated then as well, and West Virginia knocked them off and was the first team to do so in that season. So hopefully they can make history repeat itself a little bit this weekend and do that again. Texas's head coach is Tom Herman. He's now in his second season. They went 7-6 last year, and he's got them on the brink of being back to what Texas used to be this season. Ranked. They were highly ranked. They got upset by Oklahoma State last week, but Stillwater's a tough place to play. Tom Herman's done a really great job, I think, though. And what is your thoughts on Texas head coach Tom Herman, Steven? You think that he's the right man for the job and he's going to be there for a while, or what's your thoughts on him?
I like what he's done so far. I was kind of skeptical at first. I was a big fan of Charlie Strong, and I'll use that term loosely because I wouldn't say I was a fan. I just like the choice of Charlie Strong.
Right.
And I didn't really agree with them at first whenever they got rid of him because I didn't really think that they gave him enough time to develop his program. But what Tom Herman's done in the first 2 years that he's been there, I think that he's done a really good job of turning that program around. I know that, for years everyone says Texas is back. And this year, I've been really skeptical to jump on that bandwagon. Mm-hmm. But I think that I can finally agree with that statement to an extent that Texas is back. Maybe not to a national title contender like they were of years past, but I think that they are definitely on their way to being successful like that again.
Absolutely. It's been kind of tongue-in-cheek from people all year saying Texas is back, but they really are right there on the brink of being back, I feel like, with what they're doing this year. And when they still have great talent there, and going forward they're probably going to be even better and continue to improve even more. And Tom Herman's a good coach, and he's going to keep that program going as long as he sticks around there. Let's get to talk about the Texas offense a little bit. It all starts with their quarterback, Sam Ehlinger, who's a threat both running and passing. He leads their team with 8 rushing touchdowns, and also has 13 passing touchdowns versus only 2 interceptions. Outside of the Ehlinger, the run game has kind of struggled a little bit, but that kind of has to do with the same problem West Virginia's had in their run game, and that's inconsistency on the offensive line. But their true freshman running back, Keontae Ingram, has been a bright spot there as he has ran for 455 yards, and he's averaging right at 6 yards per carry. Receivers-wise, West Virginia will have to deal with, yet again, seems like week after week they've had to do this and deal with big wide receivers, and they'll have to do it again with Colin Johnson and little Jordan Humphrey, who stand 6'6" and 6'4", respectively, and they both have over 600 yards this season and have caught over 45 passes. So for a little perspective on those numbers from those two receivers, they have more catches and more yards, although less touchdowns than David Sills and Gary Jennings do. So what are your thoughts on this Texas offense going into this one?
I think that they're a really good offense. They're very sound. Like you said, that their offensive line isn't very stout, but I feel like that they do a good enough job at protecting, good enough to give Ehlinger some time. I think that they're a team when Ehlinger on the field. I think that it was 2 games back. Shane Buechele had to come in. I think it was for 3/4 of the game. They just looked like a completely different team. So when Ehlinger is on the field, it's going to be something to watch for. and West Virginia hasn't done a great job of stopping running quarterbacks at all this year. Mm-hmm. So I think that's going to be interesting to see if West Virginia can handle that.
Absolutely, and Ehlinger, he's a running quarterback, which West Virginia has struggled with not only this year but traditionally as well, really. And the thing that Ehlinger brings that some of the other running quarterbacks West Virginia's faced hasn't brought is he has great physicality and great size. I mean, looking at Ehlinger, he is bigger than most of the linebackers that West Virginia employs in their defense outside of probably Shea Campbell. So he's probably a guy that you're going to want to have to get a couple guys to the ball and rally around him, because one-on-one it's going to be tough to make a tackle on Ehlinger. Flipping over.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh yeah, he's a tough player, and the thing about him is that his passing has improved a lot this season as well. I watched that game against Oklahoma State, and he was, he's supposed to be nursing a shoulder injury supposedly, but he didn't look like he was favoring it on any of his runs. Didn't look like he was trying to protect it, and on his throws, it didn't look like it was bothering him either. He was slinging the ball pretty good, especially in that second half for Texas.
Yeah, he seems like he's definitely a tough kid. Shane Buechele started the whole year last year, and I think that, for him to come in this year and take that job, I think that he, by far and away a better quarterback than what I've seen out of Buechele.
Absolutely. That to me is one of the things that's really took Texas to kind of the next level. Their defense has been pretty good, but offensively getting Ehlinger in there kind of added a new dimension to that offense and really raised their level of play, and is what's helped their improvement so much this season. Flipping over to the other side of the ball, talking about the Texas defense, they've got a couple of big playmakers. One at safety, and a true freshman, Caden Stearns, who's been a big bright spot. He has 4 interceptions for them, which currently has tied the Texas school record for a true freshman. And then on the defense up front, on the defensive line, has been their biggest star player and a pass rushing specialist in defensive end Charles Omenahu, who in the last 4 games has racked up 6 sacks and 9.5 tackles for loss, rather. So, defensively, they've got some talented players over there. They've dealt with some injuries, but they've not let them detract from what they've done. And the thing that kind of scares me most about this Texas defense is listening to the coaches in the press conferences and talk leading up to this game so far. The one thing they've said when asked about this Texas defense is that the style that they run is very similar to what Iowa State does and what Kansas did as well. So we'll really get to see if West Virginia has made some changes to go up against that type of defense, as it's kind of scary to hear that their defense is similar in the way that they play to Iowa State. What do you think, Steven?
Oh, absolutely. I would think the same thing. I think that also if West Virginia can, find a way to get their offensive line to get a little bit of push, I think that will help. I don't think that will be, the main difference in all of it, because if you get a run game going and you get that push, then that opens all of that up for your passing game. I'm sorry.
Yeah, absolutely.
But West Virginia just got to find a way to get that push, and they can only get that passing game going for so long until someone exposes that, and we've already been exposed a couple times this year. If we go down into Austin and get a place like that, it's not going to be pretty.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a good barometer to see how this West Virginia offense has adjusted since that Iowa State game, and if they have a plan for when a defense tries to attack them in that way again, because I'm fully expecting Texas to kind of play a light box, drop 7 or 8 guys into coverage, and try and give us the run game and not let us get any big plays in the passing game, because ever since the offense kind of took that step back, whenever you can look at it when it happened against Kansas, second half versus Texas Tech, however you want to look at it, ever since then the offense has seemed like, I don't know about you, but to me it seems like the offense has been big plays is how they've gotten their points, is through big plays. You haven't really seen the offense been able to sustain a drive. So to me, I think a team looking at that is probably going to try and take away the big play, not let you big play, and make you beat them in chunks down the field. And this is going to probably be a game where West Virginia is going to have to try and do that. Even looking at that Baylor game, they weren't able to do that. All their scoring drives were like 6 plays or less. So they've been big playing people, but they need to be able to put drives together as well.
Yeah, you're right about that. They've been all 6 play drives or less. And even the first play of the first drive of the game last week was 3 play drive, and we got a 65-yard pass play.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that West Virginia needs to adjust to and find a way to move it, because that Iowa State film's out there. Texas, like I said, they play that similar defense anyways, but they can look at that film and try and attack us that same way. So hopefully we're more prepared for it this time, and I feel like the West Virginia offense will be. Offensively, Texas, they're kind of multiple in what they do. They can spread you out, or they can bring a lot of guys in, go tight formations, go power on you. And kind of that's what I'm expecting them to do in this game against West Virginia. That's probably their place where they'll try and exploit their biggest advantage, is try and bring some guys in tight and run some power things. West Virginia probably running Ellinger on some quarterback power plays, getting even another blocker in there from the running back or fullback, whoever they are running that formation, especially with the undersized guys West Virginia has at linebacker. And so I think that's probably Texas sees as their biggest advantage, and I expect that's how they'll probably try and attack us offensively. Would you say the same, that you're expecting their offense to come out and try and go heavy and run some power plays on us, and then use that to take some deep shots with some of the bigger receivers maybe?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to get ready and lean towards. But like you say, with the injuries that we have at the linebacker position and kind of the smaller guys that we've had to move into those spots, I think that they're going to try to attack those spots earlier on anyway. I think that later towards the once it starts to we start to bunch them up in the box, they're probably going to try to go over the top on us. But West Virginia, I think, I've said it once, I'll say it again, I think we're the most versatile defense in the Big 12.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're the best defense in the Big 12. And I honestly do think West Virginia will show up and be ready to play this Saturday.
Absolutely. Statistically, West Virginia is the number 1 scoring defense in the Big 12, and they're giving up under 20 points a game so far this season, which is very impressive playing in the Big 12. And if they can keep that under 20 points, I don't know if they'll be able to, but it'll be one of the first times in the last 8 or 10 years. I think that it's only been done 3 or 4 times in the past 8 or 10 years that a Big 12 defense has had under 20 points of scoring defense. So West Virginia number 1 in the Big 12 in scoring defense. So that's a big stat there, especially with the way this defense has played. And it's even more impressive, really, when you think about the injuries that West Virginia's had to endure on defense and what Tony Gibson has done despite that, playing some players out of position, playing some players that maybe he didn't expect to play as much. The job that Tony Gibson's done has pretty much been phenomenal.
Yeah, I've always said that Tony Gibson, in my mind, is probably one of the most underrated defensive coordinators in the entire country.
Absolutely. I agree with that, because if you look at what these other defenses that are starting to have success against some of these Big 12 offenses are doing, it's stuff that they've learned from Tony Gibson. Iowa State, what they're doing, they're going with almost a 3-3-5 look. Texas has gone to 3 down linemen as opposed to 4-2-5 look, and Iowa State used to have that 4-2-5 look as well. So a lot of what these Big 12 defenses are doing have started with what they saw Tony Gibson doing when he came in 2014 and the success he's had against these Big 12 offenses. So you can't say enough about the job Tony Gibson's done since he's been here.
Oh, absolutely. I've been excited about him since he came back.
Yeah, for sure. And it's, with the exception of last year, which was kind of, he didn't really have the players, didn't really have the depth. So with the exception of that, he's improved the defense every single year. 2015 was better than 14, 16 was better than 15, and then this year's better than those were even. So with the exception of last year, he's doing better and better every year, and you got to love it. And then speaking of some of those injuries that West Virginia's endured on the defense, and in spite of that, there's been talk of both of those linebackers that were long-term injured in the offseason, in Brendan Ferns and Quandarius Qualls, being medically cleared, and depending on how they practice this week, possibly getting some reps and getting back onto the field and seeing some playing time against Texas. How big is that for West Virginia, and do you expect to see them play a lot, and do you think it's a really good addition if they can, or are you scared that it may throw off the chemistry a little bit?
I do expect them to play this weekend, and I think it's huge for West Virginia. I think that like I said, because of all the injuries and everything, we're so undersized at that position that we're going to need some of those guys to just step in and be a big force, I guess. I don't know if it'll mess with the chemistry too much with the way that Dana has talked about these guys in the past, and from what I've seen on highlight tapes of what I've seen in them in the past, I don't think that it should mess with the chemistry too much. But I do think that they will be playing this weekend. Listening to Dana in his press conference, he said that they will be practicing, but they weren't guaranteed to play. But in my mind, just them being back is guaranteed enough for the fans that they will at least touch the field.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I don't think it's really going to throw off the chemistry too much. Maybe if you were thrusting them right into starting roles, but that's not. They're going to be, kind of specialized in what they're doing. And Qualls, I think, would be a great guy to be able to get in there on third down passing situations, to get in there and rush the passer and make some plays. And I think it's big that you're getting them back right before this stretch run, this Deathvember, that, as we've called it here on the show before. But I think it's great that you're getting those guys back at the right time, right when you can really use them. And it's especially great in Quandarius Qualls' case because, Ferns will be back next year, but Qualls was going to be a senior. But the fact that he's coming back with only 4 games left means that he can play in each one of these last 4 games for West Virginia, still redshirt, and we'll still get Quandarius Qualls back last year. So that's maybe something that's being overlooked that's really big point for West Virginia, is that he can play these last 4 games and still come back next year.
Yeah, I honestly didn't realize that. That is good news.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And, West Virginia defense, there's been talk of David Long possibly leaving after this year, and I expect him to do so. But even if they do, they're still going to have very solid defense. They're playing 8 deep on the defensive line, and then linebackers, you'll still have Qualls, you'll still have Ferns, you'll still have Tonkery, as well as adding the transfer from Alabama and Vandarius Cohen. So I think the defense has even more potential next year than maybe they do this year, even, which is really scary to think about.
Yeah, and we talked about the offense earlier and how they're going to keep rolling with Jack Allison. It's like you say, this defense, I don't expect them to skip one beat next year, even if David Long decides to take that next step and go to the NFL.
Yeah, absolutely. The potential is definitely there for this West Virginia team. The one ingredient that's kind of been missing is performing in big games, and they've got a chance to do that, get that monkey off their back this Saturday, and come out and win a really huge game against Texas going into this stretch run of trying to get to the Big 12 title game. The West Virginia offense is going to have to perform well in order for that to happen. And looking at the Texas defense, I know we mentioned earlier that it's kind of concerning that West Virginia's third down offense seemed to kind of fall off, especially these past couple games, as they've gone 2 for 20 on third downs in their past 2 games. But the one thing you can look at as encouraging in this game is that Texas, their weakness on defense has kind of been their pass defense, which West Virginia is the weapons they have in the pass game, and their third down defense has also been their biggest weakness, arguably. So if West Virginia can get that back on track, that's going to help them a lot in this game. And you like West Virginia's matchup against that Texas defense when you look at the fact that their pass defense has kind of been their weak spot. And, looking at what Oklahoma State was able to do, Taylor Cornelius for Oklahoma State has been a player that's been kind of much maligned this year, but he had a big game against this Texas defense, rather. So do you think that Will Greer can have a big game against this Texas defense, and it's a great game to see West Virginia's third down offense get back on track in, possibly?
I do. I think that West Virginia, like you say, that Texas' defense, or their pass defense, is, I guess, subpar, to be nice about it. And West Virginia, I think, if we can get that going early, I think that'll be a good night for West Virginia. And I think it's good that West Virginia had played all 4 quarters last week, so that it shows that we can play all 4. And I think if we can get the pass game going and then hold them off of our defense, we should have a pretty good shot.
Absolutely, I agree 100%. So we talked about the matchups a little bit and everything. That being said, we went positive first and then negative first, and we were recapping Baylor. So let's flip that around and do it the other way this time. Let's talk the kind of negative aspect first on this one. What about this game has you most concerned, has you most worried, has you most nervous?
Has me most nervous is the fact that Ellinger is a running style quarterback. He's got both an arm and he's got legs. I think that's the most thing that concerns me. The second most is where we're playing the game. I think that Alex Freeman against DKR, that's going to be a tough environment. It's going to be a really rowdy environment. So if our guys can overcome that and play well, I don't know. That's really what's the most concerning for me, though. Besides Ellinger.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I'm right there with you. Both of those things concern me a lot, but I'll probably say what's most concerning to me in this one is something we talked about a little bit earlier, was that the Texas defense, kind of similar to Iowa State's, concerned with how West Virginia's offense is going to perform against that type of defense. And, I think that they're going to be more prepared this time and they'll have better performance, but that's still always a little bit concerning. And I'm also concerned, as I mentioned earlier, about West Virginia's run game, because I think they're going to need it in this one. Look back at the last time that these two teams played a game that was big for both teams, and that's probably 2012 when West Virginia went into Austin and both teams were undefeated. And in that game, West Virginia's run game had been lackluster at best prior to that game. And in that game, Andrew Bowie ran for over 200 yards, and that was a big reason why West Virginia was able to win that game, because Texas was trying to shut down West Virginia's pass offense and not allow big plays, and so the run game was there. And I think you're looking at a similar scenario this weekend in Austin. So the run game's a concern for me that really needs to get going, I think.
I think it bodes well for West Virginia that they have Alex Singfield back there too, so that really adds to our arsenal.
Absolutely. I'm very encouraged by that. Before we get into what encourages us most, I want to talk a little bit about the game last year against Texas. And we all know what happened in that game. Will Greer, West Virginia quarterback, rolls out, dives for the end zone, injured his finger, derails not only that game but the rest of West Virginia's season, as they didn't win another game after that. Do you think that for the team that they're going to be extra motivated for this game, not just because the fact that it's a big game, but because the way that game went last year, they kind of felt like they should have won, and they're going to be motivated by that? And do you also think that Will Greer has some extra motivation added for finally getting to hopefully play a full game against Texas, knock on wood?
Yeah, I do. I think for both of them, it's kind of a revenge factor. I think the team kind of felt they let one get away. I felt like the rest of the team, besides Will Greer, after he got hurt last year, everybody in the stadium, everybody watching the game knew that Will Greer was the reason that West Virginia lost that football game. But I feel like the people on the team, the players, I don't think that they necessarily felt that way. I felt like they really felt that they had a legitimate chance to still win that football game.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of them that were on that team will still come out and they'll have that on their mind, and will too. I think the Greer, he wanted to come in after he got hurt last year. He said that multiple times, and I think that he's been, chomping at the bit to get back in there and play them this year.
Yeah, absolutely. There's enough motivation just with the fact of trying to get to the Big 12 championship game, but that's just kind of even an added bonus. That I think this West Virginia team is going to come out fired up. That's what I'm expecting anyway. And let's talk about what do you think is most encouraging, that's got you most hopeful going into this game against Texas?
I really like how our offense matches up against their defense. I know that they have, a few playmakers on their defense, but I really think that our offense is way better than their defense is. Especially like we touched on that, our passing game matches up with the defense. And I truly still believe that our run game is better than our run defense. Mm-hmm. And so if we can keep our offense on the field for most of the game, we should have the best chance to win the football game.
Absolutely. I'm most encouraged and then most hopeful because the performance of the West Virginia defense thus far this season. And, I think that they're still hungry to prove people. And, even more, adding more encouragement to that is possible return of some guys that can really add another dimension to that defense. But I think that the most encouraging thing is the West Virginia defense, because I think that no matter what happens, if it takes the offense a while to get going, if their offense isn't having a good game, that the West Virginia defense is good enough that they're going to keep them in this game within arm's length, to where if the offense gets going, they'll be all right. Or that if it comes down to just one drive, they'll be able to get the offense the ball back so they can have that one drive. And I think the defense is going to really help West Virginia to have a chance to win this football game. And that's what most encourages me, is that the defense has shown the ability. You've seen it in the Iowa State game when they kept it at 6 points for so long to try and get West Virginia to get a drive going, that the defense and the team's going to play together. They have a lot of heart, and I think this defense is going to keep West Virginia in this game and give West Virginia a great chance to win it. So that being said, talked about the matchups, what we're encouraged by, what we're worried about. Now let's talk about our X factor for this game. Steven, what do you have as your X factor in this game that really needs to perform well for West Virginia to come away with the win?
I'm going to take notes of what you just said. I think if our defense plays lights out, that's going to be the deciding factor for West Virginia, because if our defense comes to play and they can stop Ellinger and they can stop those wide receivers, our offense shouldn't have any problem feeding off of our defense.
Absolutely, I agree 100%. You know, it's a big game for the West Virginia defense to keep doing what they've been doing on the road in a hostile environment against a top 25 team. My X factor, I mentioned it briefly a little bit earlier. I'm going to go ahead and say the West Virginia run game, and more specifically, I'm going to say Alex Sinkfield. Alex Sinkfield, I think his return brought an element of explosion that helps this offense, especially where they've been struggling with run block, and he's a guy that can hit the outside, he can make somebody miss, and he can bust a big play, maybe even on a broken play. So having him in there is really my X factor for this game. If the West Virginia run game has a good game, I think that they'll be able to win this game, because I believe they're going to perform well in the pass game. If they have that running game there with it and can keep Texas's defense off balance, is really going to help them a lot. And watching that Texas versus Oklahoma State game, Texas has a tendency to overshift to one side, and Oklahoma State was really exploiting that by running off tackle or outside zone plays to the side that was shifted away from. So if West Virginia can see that on film and kind of exploit that as well, and exploit some of the shifts this Texas defensive line likes to make, I think that it could really help their run game a lot. And I think Alex Sinkfield would be a big part of that, because he's really good on those outside type runs. And I think this could be a game where you see Alex Sinkfield break out and maybe be the difference for West Virginia's offense as they try and get this win.
Yeah, it definitely is shaping up to be that style of the game could be for Sinkfield.
Absolutely. All right, so that being said, let's get into the predictions.
It's that time. It's prediction time.
What do you think is going to happen, Steven? Well, give me your prediction for this game Saturday down there in Austin.
I think West Virginia goes in there. Like we said, I think that they go in there and they want the revenge, and I think they're going to get it. I think that West Virginia wins this game 45-32. Okay,
yeah. I like that. Got us getting the two touchdown win there. I like that confidence. I think that it's that type of game. You know, West Virginia is really probably going to want to try and make a statement. We mentioned earlier, you know, big games have kind of been West Virginia's downfall in recent years, and they could really use a win in a big game, especially trying to get to this Big 12 title game. Having said that, I've wrestled with this prediction. I mentioned earlier on our season prediction show, I had our losses to Texas and Oklahoma, but you know, as the seasons went on, I really liked this matchup between West Virginia has against Texas. And, you know, going with my gut, I just got a good feeling about this one that West Virginia is going to pull out the win here. I don't see it as a high scoring affair as you do. I think that West Virginia's defense is going to be kind of what keeps them in the game, and the offense either gets going later or makes a play in the end. And I think it's the type of game where West Virginia's defense is going to hold Texas at bay until the offense gets rolling, or to allow the offense to make a play late. Maybe the defense gets a stop and allows the offense to have that scoring drive. So I see it as kind of a more lower scoring affair. And, you know, maybe Texas is up 24-21. West Virginia defense gets a stop. Will Greer leads a scoring drive, and West Virginia walks away with the win in Austin. But either way, I've got a good feeling about this one, and I think that West Virginia can get a big win and try and continue their road to the Big 12 championship game. So that being said, I've got West Virginia winning this one 28-24. All right, so that'll pretty much wrap us up. A little two-part special for you guys. Recapped Baylor, got into our debut on our fan question segment, and then got into our Texas preview. Really appreciate Steven Vestal from Almost Heaven Athletics. Write some great articles there. Be sure and check that out, almostheavenathletics.com, if you haven't already. Thanks for coming on, Steven.
Thanks for having me, man. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Always enjoy having you on. And be sure and follow us on Twitter if you don't already. A lot of good coverage there, live tweets during the games, and you can follow us on Twitter at WVU Country Roads. So I'm hoping to see the West Virginia Mountaineers continue on their path to the Big 12 championship game, continue a great season, and move to 7-1 on Saturday. That being said, for Steven Vestal, as always, I'm your host, Jordan Cruz, and until next time, let's go, Mountaineers.
Are you ready to party?
Country road.